This is Rainy Night Horrors. Outside, the storm brews, and with it comes something darker. Every drop masks a sound, every shadow holds a shape. You're not imagining it. You're hearing the truth. Listen closely. It's already here. My sanity, I believe, began its quiet erosion the day I crossed the threshold of this house. Elias Vance, that's me, seeking refuge a few months past. A sanctuary for work, a buffer against the clamor of close neighbors. Outwardly, it offered only the mundane. Bleached walls, a modest porch overlooking a fenced square of green, the Spartan furniture I'd positioned myself. Unremarkable. For weeks, tranquility reigned. I prepared meals, absorbed the flickering narratives of television, occasionally succumbing to sleep on the sofa after late nights wrestling with deadlines. Then, the intrusions began, subtle as dust motes dancing in unseen currents, faint percussions from unoccupied rooms, fleeting shapes skittering at the edges of my sight, vanishing the instant I tried to fix them in my gaze. The house settling, I told myself. Optical fatigue, convenient fictions, soon shredded by the growing insistence of the knocks, the lengthening dwell time of those peripheral shadows. My labor confines me here most days, a solitary existence governed by routine. Dawn around 7, the ritual of coffee, the digital tide of emails before the workday commences. Through daylight hours, the house maintains its composure. Floorboards rest easy. The air holds a steady temperature. Passage from room to room feels unremarkable, unobserved. But with the descent of evening, something alters. It begins near the dinner hour, a palpable thickening of the atmosphere, a coiling tension in my own shoulders. A low, visceral certainty whispers that solitude is an illusion, though no presence registers visually. It's akin to being under scrutiny, the very structure possessing a quiet, unwavering gaze. No voices, nothing so defined, just an ambient pressure, prompting involuntary glances over my shoulder. Several evenings ago, dinner concluded late. I found myself adrift on the couch, navigating the endless streams of channels. Weariness weighted my eyelids. That's when I registered it. A reflection swimming on the dark television screen, a silhouette materializing behind my seated form near the hallway's door. I didn't turn, not immediately. A paralysis seized me. My stare locked onto that indistinct shape, a tall, vertical smear of darkness, the vague impression of stature. My heart began a frantic drumming against my ribs. My palms grew slick. 3 seconds, perhaps 4, I wrestled with reason, attempting to assign the apparition to some innocuous object's mirrored form. Then, slowly, deliberately, I pivoted. Nothing. The hallway stretched vacant. Returning my gaze to the screen, the silhouette had dissolved. I extinguished the television and retreated directly to my bedroom, illuminating every fixture in my wake. That night, the hallway light burned until dawn. Morning brought a flush of foolishness, the ritual of brushing teeth, the shower's steam. I attempted levity, a self-deprecating chuckle that died in my throat. The sensation of being watched clung stubbornly. While water cascaded in the bathroom, faint shuffling sounds emanated from the living room, like feet dragging reluctantly across the floorboards. I cut the shower, listening intently. The noise persisted for a handful of seconds, then ceased abruptly. Emerging to investigate, I found the living room still, curtains drawn, furniture precisely as I'd left it. A meticulous scan revealed nothing disturbed, yet the frantic tempo of my heart refused to subside for some time. Rationality became my shield. I meticulously inspected window seals for drafts capable of conjuring phantom sounds. I pressed on floorboards, seeking looseness, attributing creaks to the structure's age. All appeared sound, normal. My desk occupies a small chamber near the front entrance. I sat there, attempting to marshal thoughts for work, my gaze repeatedly snagged by the hallway's silent vista. Nothing stirred, but the unease remained a physical presence. That night, I sought refuge in early sleep, aided by melatonin, hoping chemical slumber might blunt the night's strange sensitivities. I closed my bedroom door and locked it, an unusual precaution born of a sudden, sharp need for a tangible barrier against the house's unseen dimensions. Hours later, a faint scraping noise pulled me from sleep's fragile embrace. Like fingernails drawn across wood grain, my eyes snapped open. The sound originated just beyond the bedroom door. A prickling chill traced my arms. My breath grew shallow, rapid. I lay immobile in the darkness, staring at the solid plane of the door, debating action versus feigned sleep. My phone rested on the nightstand. I fumbled for it, activating the flashlight. The instant the beam struck the door, the scraping ceased. My heart hammered, a painful pressure building in my chest. I remained thus for long moments, light trained on the door, ears straining against the profound silence that had fallen. Eventually, summoning resolve, I rose, switched on the overhead light, and approached. With a trembling hand, I unlocked and opened the door. The hallway yawned empty. The air, however, felt distinctly colder, biting at my bare feet through the floorboards. I scanned left, right, flipping the hall light switch. No one. No marks marred the door's surface. The knob felt solid, secure. Retreating, I relatched and locked the door, then spent the remainder of the night awake, scrolling through the phone's meaningless glow, intermittent music deployed to fracture the oppressive quiet. The thought of summoning company, a friend, a relative, flickered, but shame extinguished it. A grown man, unnerved by his own home. The words felt absurd. My house does peculiar things after dark. Instead, I pursued a more detached approach. A small digital camera, purchased and positioned on a living room shelf, its lens aimed toward the main space and the corridor leading to my bedroom. The first night's recording captured only cryptic audio artifacts, minute raps, sporadic clicks. Visually, nothing but the empty room bathed in low light grain. The second night yielded faint footfalls on the audio track and a transient flicker of the overhead lamp caught on video, though no discernible form accompanied it. A thorough check revealed no faulty wiring, no earthly reason for the light's brief falter. A flashlight became my bedside companion. Pre-sleep rituals expanded to include meticulous checks of every lock, every window latch. Even the shower curtain warranted inspection, pulled aside nightly against the persistent, formless anxiety. One evening, attempting normalcy through the routine of dinner preparation, chopping vegetables, grilling chicken, the kitchen light began a slow, deliberate pulse. Not a flicker, but a gradual dimming, followed by a return to full brightness, repeated several times. My heart leaped. I kept glancing upward, seeking a loose bulb. Tightening it changed nothing. The ebb and flow continued for several more seconds, then stabilized. For the rest of that night, the light behaved impeccably. A few days later, reading in bed near 10, the house wrapped in silence. The window stood slightly ajar, admitting cool night air. Then, a low humming intruded, an electronic drone, seemingly emanating from the hallway. I lowered my book, listening. The sound intensified, then cut off with startling abruptness. Flashlight in hand, I ventured into the corridor. Nothing visible. I swept the beam across the walls, searching for a malfunctioning outlet. All seemed ordinary. It was then I heard it, a soft thud from behind me, back towards my bedroom. I spun, light stabbing the darkness. Empty, but my gaze snagged on the bedroom door. It was moving, slowly easing inward, as if gently pushed. A cold dread pooled in my stomach. Taking a steady breath, I stepped back into the room. Vacant. Sweat beaded on my forehead. My legs felt unreliable. I checked the window, barely open, the draft insufficient to move the heavy door in such a manner. I closed the window fully, then experimentally swung the door, testing its weight and resistance. It required definite effort, not the wind. I stood there, pulse racing, a captive in my own uncertain space. That night, I left the door ajar, affording a view down the hall from my bed. Sleep came only in ragged fragments, 20 or 30 minutes at a stretch, each trivial creak or settling sound jolting me back to panicked awareness. The situation escalated definitively about a week later. I awoke near 2 a.m., drawn from sleep by a scraping sound against the living room walls. Not loud, but gratingly persistent, like heavy furniture being laboriously dragged. Flashlight gripped tight. I forced myself to investigate, body rigid, throat parched. Reaching the living room, I flicked on the overhead light. The couch sat askew, shifted several inches from its usual position, angled slightly towards the lifeless television screen. A certainty settled upon me. I had not left it like this. My hands trembled as I circled the displaced sofa, searching for signs of intrusion. The front door remained securely locked, windows fastened. Nothing else seemed disturbed. I shoved the couch back into alignment, then stood, breathing heavily, grappling with the impossible question of agency. Sleep was banished for the remainder of the night. I retreated to the armchair opposite the couch, lights blazing, maintaining a weary vigil, eyes ceaselessly scanning the room's corners for any flicker of shadow, any hint of movement. Around 4 a.m., a faint click echoed from the hallway, but nothing followed. Only the slow arrival of dawn brought a measure of relief, the mundane sunlight temporarily sanitizing the house, rendering the night's events dreamlike, unreal. Now, every dusk signals a descent. As sunset bleeds across the sky, my pulse quickens, muscles clench. I find myself prowling the house, a restless circuit through each room, flipping lights on, then off, testing the environment's response. Sometimes I stand motionless in the hallway, holding my breath, straining to capture the elusive sounds of footsteps or scratching. I've heard them countless times, yet the source remains maddeningly diffuse, echoing through the walls, sometimes seeming to originate overhead, sometimes from within the partitions themselves. Leaving has become a recurring thought, yet the investment of time, money, and hope anchors me here. A part of me stubborn, or foolish, demands understanding. I summoned an electrician. He performed his checks, tested circuits and switches, pronounced everything nominal. I offered no mention of shadows or shifting furniture, unwilling to voice the irrational. A few nights passed. I attempted a confrontation, standing my ground in the darkened living room. My phone's flashlight lay ready but dormant, hoping the gloom might grant clarity to the elusive shapes. Initially, only the familiar groans and sighs of the old structure reached me, but after several minutes, a distinct chill permeated the air. Gooseflesh prickled my arms. The fine hairs on my neck lifted. Then, reflected in the obsidian blankness of the television screen, I saw it again. A dark contour on the far side of the couch. It shifted, subtly altering its posture. My heart commenced its frantic rhythm. I thumbed the flashlight on, spearing the spot with light. Nothing. Yet the feeling of presence lingered, palpable, suffocating. My breathing grew ragged. Sweat filmed my temples. Rooted for a moment in pure terror, I then stumbled backward, nearly tripping on the carpet's edge in my haste to reach the relative safety of the hallway. I sealed myself in the bedroom once more. This has become my existence these past weeks. Daylight hours are a performance of normalcy. Work completed, meals consumed, attempts at distraction via screen or page. But the setting sun invariably draws the curtain on that facade. The house's ambient noises morph into threats. Each tap, each creak becomes a potential harbinger, setting my nerves alight. My phone remains perpetually charged, perpetually near, yet the nocturnal calls for aid remain unmade. There must be a logical explanation, I insist internally, even as evidence mounts against it. Last night introduced a new horror. Lying in bed near midnight, drifting towards sleep, eyes closed, actively trying to ignore the house's nocturnal murmurs. Suddenly, I felt the mattress dip beside me, a distinct compression, as if someone had sat down. My eyes flew open. I froze, utterly still. The blankets felt tauter, pulled downward by an unseen weight. Sheer panic constricted my chest, stealing my breath. Seconds stretched into an eternity before the pressure abruptly vanished. I snatched my phone, thumbed the flashlight, sweeping its beam across the bed, the room. Empty. The door remained locked. Nausea churned in my gut. Scrambling out of bed, I unlocked the door and fled, practically running to the living room. There I remained, huddled on the couch, under the glare of every light, until morning painted the windows gray. Sleep offered no refuge, only brief, jarring lapses, followed by heart-pounding awakenings. I don't understand what resides here. No evidence points to a human intruder. Cameras yield only ambiguity. Locks hold firm. Inspections reveal nothing amiss. Yet the disquieting movements, the phantom sounds, the chilling certainty of a presence, these persist, intensify. The toll is physical, a constant restlessness, eyes perpetually scanning, ears forever straining for the next scrape, the next footfall. My appetite wanes, overshadowed by the knot of anxiety permanently lodged in my stomach. The allure of a motel room, of uninterrupted sleep, grows stronger daily. This is my reality now. I write this near midday, bathed in the deceptive normalcy of daylight. But tonight, the footsteps will return. Shadows will writhe at the periphery, dissolving under direct light. My bedroom door will be locked, yet scratching will sound from the hallway. Perhaps the mattress will dip again, or the couch will migrate, or the lights will perform their spectral dimming act, and I will be left alone, listening to the frantic pulse in my own ears, wondering if my mind is fracturing, or if this house is, in some terrifying way, awake. Answers elude me, but this I know. Whatever haunts these rooms is undeniable. The place I sought as sanctuary is now a source of escalating dread, filled with inexplicable whispers and shadows that crawl beneath my skin. Something is here with me every night, and home is no longer safe. The day had bled Elara dry, leaving behind an ache deep in her bones. All she craved was a pause, a handful of minutes stolen back before the journey home swallowed her whole. She slipped into a station lavatory, one of those forgotten alcoves shunned by the usual thrum of transit. The terminus itself was cavernous and hushed, footsteps ghosting in the vaulted distance. Midnight loomed, or perhaps had already passed, and the profound stillness was a balm. Just a splash of cold water, a moment to shed the day's skin. That was the modest prayer. Inside, the light was a sallow, stuttering thing, fluorescence buzzing erratically, casting skeletal shadows across the grime-webbed tiles. A profound quiet reigned, pierced only by that insistent electrical hum. Elara chose a stall, the lock clicking with metallic finality, a flimsy shield against the world. She sagged against the cool metal door, eyelids fluttering closed, attempting to dissolve into the relative dark. And then, a sound, a dry whisper of movement just outside, the scuffing friction of something dragged. Her muscles went taut, every nerve ending alight, straining to decipher the stillness. It vanished as abruptly as it began, leaving only the drone of the failing lights. Someone else seeking refuge, perhaps, weary like her. She willed her shoulders to drop, leaned back once more, seeking oblivion. It returned, a slow, grating scrape this time, deliberate, like stone tortured across the floor tiles. Closer now, undeniably outside her fragile sanctuary. Her eyes snapped open, her pulse leaped, a frantic drum against her ribs. A glance downward revealed nothing but the stained ceramic beneath the door's gap. Yet the sound persisted, measured, unhurried, drawing nearer. Her fists clenched, breath held captive in her chest, desperate not to betray her presence. Through the narrow space at the bottom, a sliver of shadow elongated, inching forward. Then, impossibly, something slid into view beneath the partition, a cold glass eye, the unblinking aperture of a camera lens, stark, unmistakable, aimed directly at her. A hand, disembodied, held it fast, pressing it flush against the grimy floor. Raw panic surged, a tide threatening to drown her. Her heartbeat, a deafening roar, she felt sure must be audible. Thought fractured. What now? Silence was paramount. Acknowledgement, fatal. But the terror clawed at her throat. With excruciating slowness, she drew her feet from the floor, pressing her spine flat against the stall's back wall, shrinking into herself, praying for invisibility. The lens remained, utterly still, a patient predator waiting for the slightest twitch. An age seemed to crawl by before the lens retracted, sliding back into the unseen. A ragged, trembling breath escaped Elara's lips. Her hands, slick with sweat, gripped the stall walls. She waited, ears straining against the silence, listening for retreat, for any sign of departure. Nothing, only the ceaseless hum overhead. She forced air into her lungs, trying to quell the tremor, trying to forge a plan. Her mind churned with visions of the Watcher, lurking just beyond the thin metal door. Leaving felt impossible. Staying, untenable. Gingerly, soundlessly, she twisted the lock. The door groaned open a mere fraction. She peered through the slit. The washroom appeared deserted, bathed in the sickly light, the buzzing the only sound. A hesitant step out onto the tiles, her heart hammering. Then, a flicker of motion in the periphery, deep in the room's farthest corner. A shape stood there, swallowed partially by shadow, observing. The face was indistinct, a blur in the dimness, but the posture was absolute stillness, focused entirely on her. A cold knot tightened in Ilara's stomach as she saw it. A phone held aloft, its screen casting a faint, ghastly glow. Recording. A wave of pure, paralyzing dread washed over her, rooting her feet to the spot. Escape screamed in her mind, but her limbs refused. She stood frozen, locked in a silent confrontation, thoughts scattering like startled birds. Without preamble, the figure detached itself from the gloom, taking a single step forward. A fleeting impression of the face, pallid, utterly devoid of expression, eyes like chips of obsidian, boring into her soul. No word, no sound, just another deliberate step closer, the intense gaze unwavering. Instinct finally broke the spell. Ilara's body reacted, pivoting, launching her toward the exit. Her footfalls clattered, amplified in the echoing space, a frantic rhythm against the backdrop of her own ragged breathing. Behind her, she registered the sound of pursuit. Steady, unhurried footfalls, chillingly calm, as if confident of the outcome. She slammed through the lavatory door, bursting onto the vast, empty station concourse, eyes darting wildly for any sign of life, any potential rescuer. The platform lay deserted under the stark lighting, the only answer the low rumble of a departing train fading into the night. She didn't cease her flight until she spilled onto the vacant street outside, lungs burning, gulping air. A frantic glance over her shoulder confirmed her solitude. No pursuer emerged. Only the station remained, immense and silent, guarding its secrets. A vibration against her leg made her flinch violently. Her phone. With trembling fingers, she retrieved it, the screen illuminating her pale face. One new notification, an unknown sender. Heart lurching, she tapped it open. A cold dread, sharp as ice shards, pierced her as she absorbed the 5 words displayed. Nice to see you. Nausea roiled within her. Who? How? The question hammered uselessly against the certainty that their gaze lingered, somehow transmitted through the inert screen. She stabbed at the delete button, powered the device off, and began the walk home. Each step heavy, every shadow seeming to shift, glancing back constantly, the feeling of being watched clinging to her like a second skin. Sleep was a forgotten country that night. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the wind outside her window, jolted her upright, convinced the Watcher was near, waiting. She checked the door locks repeatedly, peered through secured windows, but the phantom touch of the observation remained inescapable. Days bled into a week. Ilara tried to rationalize, to shrink the encounter into a bizarre, isolated incident, a random creep's attempt to frighten. Then her phone chimed again, another unfamiliar number. This time, no words, just an image, a photograph of her, captured from behind, walking down a busy street earlier that day, utterly oblivious. Terror, cold and absolute, seized her. Her hand shook uncontrollably as she stared at the proof. They hadn't stopped. They were somewhere close, unseen, documenting her life. The intrusions became routine. More messages, stark and unsettling. Pictures taken through windows, across cafe tables, snippets of overheard conversations relayed back to her, details of her clothing, her destinations. The world began to warp around her. Paranoia became her constant companion. Every stranger's glance felt loaded. Every shadow held a potential threat. She reported it, presenting the chilling evidence to impassive officers who spoke of insufficient grounds, of untraceable numbers. She changed her number, fled her apartment for another anonymous box, meticulously altered her routes, her habits, desperate to break the invisible tether. It was futile. The messages always found her, persistent, intimate reminders that escape was an illusion. Wherever she went, whatever she did, they saw. And now, seated here, trying to anchor herself in the telling, her phone vibrates against the table. A familiar dread coils in her stomach. Another message has arrived. The firmament fractured, night's obsidian canvas ripped by celestial violence, lightning searing white fissures across the black. Who could fathom such raw beauty heralding a descent into dread, a shadow that would stretch across years? I was navigating the serpentine roads from my mother's house, bone-weary from a day wrestling furniture, corralling memories into cardboard boxes. In the back seat, my daughter, Maya, drifted in slumber, her small hand fiercely guarding a threadbare plush owl. A 2-hour journey, perhaps, on a kinder night. But this tempest, gathering its fury, promised a longer, darker passage. Rain cascaded, a liquid curtain so dense the wipers, frantic at their highest setting, carved only fleeting glimpses of the asphalt ribbon disappearing 10 feet ahead. We plunged deeper into a forest that crowded the road, its arboreal walls thick and watchful. Each electric flare transformed familiar trees into skeletal specters, their branches clawing at the bruised sky, casting phantoms that writhed towards our fragile capsule of metal and glass. My grip tightened on the wheel, knuckles pale islands in a sea of tension. An hour still remained between us and home, yet the storm raged unabated, a primal tantrum with no end in sight. The impulse to surrender, to pull on to the sodden shoulder and wait, warred with a deeper unease. The vulnerability of stillness on this desolate artery. Then the world cracked open. A thunderclap, immediate and visceral, jolted me. In that sliver of startled reflex, the tires met a treacherous slickness. Control dissolved. We were pirouetting, a slow-motion ballet of impending disaster. Trees lunged from the periphery, a green blur rushing to embrace us. Maya's cry, sharp and bewildered, pierced the roaring air as sleep was torn from her. A sickening heave, the earth falling away beneath us, followed by a collision that resonated deep in my bones. Silence, save for the relentless drumming of rain on the roof and the ragged rhythm of my own breath. Maya's soft whimpers surfaced through the fog. "Mama, what was that?" Ignoring the jagged protest in my neck, I twisted towards her. "It's all right, sweetling. Just a little bump. Are you hurt anywhere?" Her head moved side to side, eyes vast pools reflecting the stormlit chaos outside. Relief, thin but present, allowed me to assess our predicament. The car lay tilted precariously down an embankment, its trajectory halted by the unyielding girth of an ancient oak. The ignition turned, coughed a metallic death rattle, and fell silent. A cold fist clenched around my heart. Stranded, lost in this deluge, miles from anywhere. My phone, clutched like a talisman, offered only a dead, mocking screen. No bars, no lifeline. "Okay," I forced the word out, striving for a calm I didn't possess, a shield for Maya. "We'll be fine. Someone will drive by. Help will come." But the minutes bled into an hour, then stretched towards 2, marked only by the storm's monotonous percussion. No headlights sliced the gloom. The chill began to seep into the cabin, insidious and deep. Maya, abandoning the back seat, huddled against me, a small, shivering bird seeking warmth. Just as hope frayed to its final thread, twin beams pierced the oppressive darkness, a luminescence cutting through the downpour. My breath caught. A truck, slowing, pulling onto the shoulder opposite our wreck. A figure emerged, head bowed against the onslaught, moving towards us. I lowered the window a fraction, the damp chill rushing in. "Are you folks okay?" The voice was deep, muffled by the rain. Lightning briefly illuminated a man's face beneath a sodden baseball cap. "We had an accident," I managed, my voice trembling with cold, with the residue of adrenaline. "The car's dead. Could we possibly use your phone?" He shook his head, rain streaming from the cap's brim. "No signal out this far, Mom, but I can take you to town. About 20 miles that way." Hesitation coiled within me. Every primal warning screamed against trusting this stranger, this apparition conjured by the storm. Yet, the alternative, huddling here until dawn, or worse. "Thank you," I said, injecting a false confidence into the words. "That would be wonderful." He gave a curt nod. "Right then. Get your things. Come on over. We'll get you sorted." I gathered our jackets, Maya's owl, then eased her out into the lashing rain. Instantaneously soaked, we scrambled up the muddy incline. He stood by his truck. The passenger door swung open, an invitation into the dim interior. As we drew closer, something snagged my attention. A flicker in his eyes, an unsettling stillness to his posture that sent ice water through my veins. "Actually," I heard myself say, pulling Maya tighter against my hip, "perhaps we should just wait. For the police. Someone will find the car." The change was instantaneous, terrifying. The veneer of helpfulness dissolved, revealing something flinty and predatory beneath. "That wasn't exactly a suggestion," he murmured, the voice now low, freighted with menace. My blood turned to slush as his hand moved inside his jacket. A glint of reflected light. Steel. A knife blade, catching the weak glow from his dashboard. "Get in," he commanded, the word sharp as the blade itself. "Both of you. Now," Maya whimpered, burying her face against my side. My thoughts scattered, frantic for an escape route that didn't exist. Alone, unarmed, hemmed in by the storm and this sudden, inexplicable violence. "Please," the word was a fragile whisper, We don't want trouble. Just let us go. A laugh, harsh and grating, momentarily drowned by another thunderous rupture overhead. Oh, you're in trouble. Get in the damn truck before I run out of patience. My gaze dropped to Maya, her small face a mask of pure terror, then snapped back to the man, the knife. A surge, primal and fierce, flooded me. Protector. With a strangled cry, I thrust Maya behind me and threw myself at him. Surprise gave me a fleeting advantage. We tumbled together into the slick, cold mud. Maya screamed. We grappled, the knife at terrifying proximity, rain and earth making purchase impossible. Somehow, my flailing hand struck his wrist, sending the blade skittering away. But his strength was greater. His hands found my throat, squeezing, the world narrowing to a tunnel of roaring blood and fading light. Then, a dull, solid thud. The pressure vanished. I gasped, sucking in wet air, rolling onto my side. Maya stood above us, a thick, fallen branch gripped tight in her small fists. She'd struck him from behind. Run! The word tore from my raw throat. Grabbing her hand, we plunged into the black embrace of the woods. Underbrush snagged and tore at our clothes. Thorns ripped at skin as we ran, blind and desperate. Behind us, curses echoed, the heavy sounds of pursuit lending wings to our terror. Lungs burned, legs screamed, Maya sobbed with each jarring step. Then, salvation of a sort. A hollow beneath the roots of a massive, overturned tree. Scarcely shelter, but the only refuge offered. I pulled Maya inside, pressing my hand gently over her mouth to stifle her cries. We huddled, shivering violently, hearts hammering against ribs as footsteps crunched nearby. Can't hide, his voice snarled, chillingly close. I'll find you, and when I do. His promise dissolved into a new sound, faint at first, then rapidly swelling. Sirens. Someone must have seen the car. He swore, a vicious sound, and his footsteps pounded away, retreating. We remained frozen, fear paralyzing us, convinced it was a ruse. Only when official voices called out, beams from powerful flashlights slicing through the rain-streaked trees, did I dare to breathe, to hope. Here, I croaked, the sound ragged. Over here. We're here. The ensuing hours dissolved into a surreal haze of flashing lights, uniformed figures, and the calm efficiency of paramedics. Wrapped in rough blankets, Maya and I recounted the nightmare, our words tumbling out between shivers. They found his truck abandoned miles down the road. The man himself had vanished into the storm-lashed night. The knife lay gleaming dully in the mud where it had fallen, a tangible piece of the horror. Later, sitting in the sterile quiet of an ambulance, Maya curled against me. The shaking finally subsided, replaced by the profound weight of what we'd narrowly escaped. You saved us, I whispered against her damp hair. My brave girl. She looked up, her eyes still wide, but the terror receding, replaced by an unnerving maturity. We saved each other, Mama, she replied softly. In that instant, eclipsing the fear and the exhaustion, surged a fierce, protective love. We had stared into the abyss and clawed our way back, not by mere chance, but through mutual courage. The path forward would be shadowed, I knew, marked by sleepless nights, therapy's quiet rooms, the long relearning of safety. But we were alive. We were indivisible. Whatever awaited us, we would meet it as we had met the storm and the man, together, drawing strength from the fierce, unbreakable filament connecting mother and child. As the ambulance doors closed, sealing us from the receding tempest, the first pale fingers of dawn tentatively probed the bruised clouds. A new day. We had endured to witness it. The memory would remain, a permanent scar tissue, reminding us of the darkness that waits. Yet, it would also stand as a testament to resilience, to love, and to the incandescent light within us that no storm, no predator could ever truly extinguish. The torch beam stuttered, a faltering heartbeat throwing spasms of shadow against the slick, weeping stone. I wrapped the metal casing against my thigh, a desperate prayer whispered with knuckles, but the illumination only sickened, retreating further into the cavern's deep-throated dark. That dwindling circle was our compass, our sun, our fragile tether to the known, and it was unraveling. Ilara? Reese? My voice, thin and reedy, stretched out only to be swallowed by the damp, indifferent rock. We might have a situation. A simple descent, they'd called it. Months Ilara, Reese, and I had spent charting this subterranean adventure. Seasoned trekkers above ground, yes, but novices in this labyrinthine underworld. The siren song of discovery, the allure of the unseen, had deafened us to caution's murmur. Now, hemmed in by a darkness that felt absolute, the weight of our naivety began to press. We'd breached the cave's maw near dawn, laden with schematics, coils of rope, and provisions deemed ample. The initial hours pulsed with exhilaration. We traced the filigree of ancient mineral flows, photographed rivers birthed in darkness, bathed in the intoxicating notion of being the first eyes in an age to witness these hidden architectures. But the earth guards its secrets jealously. Deeper we plunged, and the path diverged from our confident charts. A wrong turn spiraled into disorientation. Backtracking dissolved into a confusing sameness, each corridor mocking the last. Then Reese, his footing betrayed by unseen moisture, crumpled with a sharp cry, his ankle twisting beneath him. Not broken, but damaged enough to bleed momentum from our expedition. And now this, our primary beacon faltering towards oblivion. A situation? Ilara's voice emerged from the blackness to my left, stretched taut over a frame of rising panic. I swept the dying beam her way, catching the frantic gleam in her wide pupils. The torch, I stated, the words blunt instruments. It's failing. Batteries must be shot. Reese hobbled closer, his face a pale mask in the gloom. Can't be. They were new this morning. Sealed. Well, the cave disagrees, I retorted, the sharpness instantly regretted. Futile, this blame. We were woven together in this predicament. Ilara fumbled for her phone, its screen blooming into life, casting her features in an ethereal, chilling luminescence. 0 bars, naturally, but the light. We can use its light for now. I nodded, a surge of gratitude for her presence of mind. Right, but sparingly. We've no idea how long now has to last down here. The chill finality of it began to crystallize, adrift in a subterranean maze, our light measured in percentages, the surface world deaf to any cry. The cool, moist air, once a welcome balm, now felt predatory, clinging like a shroud, leaching warmth from bone. All right, I forced a measure of calm into my tone, a captain steadying a phantom tiller. Wandering is suicide. We need structure, a plan. Reese nodded, his breath catching as he shifted weight onto the injured foot. Retrace. Try to find the main artery we came in on. A sound strategy. On paper. In the suffocating confines, illuminated only by the phone's narrow artificial glare, it proved maddening. Every fissure seemed familiar, yet alien. We'd commit to a passage, hearts lifting with fragile recognition, only to be rebuffed by a cold dead end or thrust into a chamber utterly unknown. Hours bled one into the next, indistinguishable in the perpetual subterranean night. We husbanded our dwindling water, portioned out crumbs of food, acutely aware of their preciousness. The silence grew immense, broken only by the scuff of our boots, the rhythmic plink of water weeping from the vaulted ceiling somewhere above, and our own increasingly ragged breaths. The strain etched itself onto us. Reese's limp deepened into a painful drag. Alara's hand, holding the phone aloft like a weakening talisman, trembled visibly as its battery icon bled towards empty. A primal claustrophobia began to constrict my chest, the sheer tonnage of rock and earth above feeling heavier, more personal with every step. Then came the sound, so subtle at first, a vibration more than a noise. I dismissed it as blood pounding in my ears, a low, guttural rumble resonating through the very stone beneath our feet. Did you feel that? I breathed, the question swallowed by the sudden tension. Alara's eyes, huge in the phone's glow, met mine. What was it? The ground. Before the thought could fully form, the rumbling returned, amplified, shaking the floor. Pebbles danced across the stone, and a fine, gritty dust began to sift down from the unseen ceiling. Move, Reese urged, his voice sharp with sudden instinct. Find cover, now. We lurched forward, directionless, the goal no longer escape, but simply survival. Find a space less likely to collapse, a refuge should the mountain decide to shrug us off. The tremors intensified, a deep, seismic groan, larger stones detached, thudding nearby, forcing us into a stumbling, weaving run. Alara's phone beam slashed wildly, painting the chaos in strobing, nightmarish flashes. Just as exhaustion threatened to buckle my knees, we spilled out of a narrow passage into a vast cavern. The ceiling soared into invisibility above, buttressed by colossal pillars of stone, ancient sentinels of the deep. It felt inherently more stable, a geological sanctuary. Wordlessly, drawn by the same instinct, we converged near the center. We huddled close as the world shuddered around us. I felt Alara's slight frame trembling against mine, heard Reese's harsh, labored breathing. In that moment, staring into the abyss of our potential end, a fierce, protective warmth bloomed for these two souls beside me. Whatever darkness awaited, we faced it bound together. The subterranean violence seemed to stretch for an age, but likely lasted only moments. When the last tremor faded, it left behind a silence that was thick, choking, absolute, and the phone in Alara's hand was dead, whether shattered by the shaking or finally succumbing to its drained battery. The result was the same. We were plunged into a darkness so profound it felt like a physical substance. I'd heard the cliche, "Can't see your hand in front of your face," and dismissed it. Now, I understood. The blackness was total, pressing against my eyelids, extinguishing the very memory of light. Is everyone intact? My voice was a dry rasp, thick with dust. "Think so," Alara whispered back, small and fragile in the void. A grunt from Reese confirmed his presence beside me. We remained there, suspended in the aftermath, adrift in individual oceans of fear. The stark truth was unavoidable now, lost, lightless, entombed, perhaps permanently. The odds felt infinitesimally small, dwindling towards zero. Yet the simple fact remained. We breathed, and while breath remained, surrender was unthinkable. "Right," I said, shattering the heavy silence. "Thinking caps on. There has to be another way." "How?" Alara's voice frayed at the edges. "We don't even know where here is." "But caves breathe," Reese countered, his voice gaining a thread of conviction. "Air moves. If there wasn't an exchange somewhere, we'd be suffocating. It's coming from somewhere." He was right. A sliver of logic in the overwhelming dark. I drew a breath, trying to anchor my thoughts. "Okay, spread out slowly. Feel along the floor, the walls. Listen. Feel for a draft, any air movement." We fanned out, navigating by touch alone, hands sweeping across cold, uneven stone. Progress was agonizingly slow, measured in inches. Every few moments, a name called out into the black, a vocal anchor point in the disorienting void. Time ceased to exist, measured only by the scrape of fabric on rock, the pounding of hearts. Then finally, against my cheek, the barest, most ephemeral kiss of moving air. "Here," my voice cracked with adrenaline. "Alara, Reese, I've got something." They navigated towards my voice by sound. Together, we pressed against the wall, following the faint, almost imperceptible current. Our fingers traced the cold stone, seeking the source. Gradually, undeniably, the whisper of air strengthened, and with it, carried on that impossible breeze, came a scent, loamy, green, impossibly alive, the perfume of the world above. Hope surged, a potent fuel. We moved faster, crawling now as the passage dictated, the promise of escape overriding the discomfort. The tunnel constricted, forcing us onto our bellies, scraping over sharp rock, but the current pulled us onward, and then, infinitesimally small, almost imagined, a single point of light pricked the oppressive blackness ahead. It wavered, vanished, reappeared. As we crawled closer, it solidified, grew fractionally larger. Daylight, fractured and filtered through a narrow fissure. The opening was minuscule, a mere crack in the mountain's flank, barely wide enough to admit a hand. But it was egress. It was salvation. Fueled by a desperate, primal energy, we attacked the opening, tearing at loose rock, widening the gap millimeter by painful millimeter. Stone bit into our palms, scraped our knuckles raw, but the pain registered dimly, eclipsed by the blinding imperative to escape. Finally, it was enough. One by one, we forced our bruised bodies through the rough aperture, tumbling out into the staggering, almost violent brilliance of late afternoon sun. We lay sprawled on a slope, thick with grass, far removed from our entry point, blinking against the light, alive, gasping the clean, sweet air, feeling the sun's warmth soak into our chilled skin. A profound, aching gratitude washed over me for the simple miracle of existence, for the resilience of friendship, for the overwhelming gift of light returned. Our subterranean passage had spanned less than 2 days, yet it had irrevocably reshaped us. We carried back a humbling respect for the Earth's indifferent power and a startling awareness of our own tenacity. Above all, we had learned, viscerally and forever, never to mistake the light for granted. Solitude was a deliberate acquisition. My sanctuary, a modest house nestled deep within Whisper Creek, Montana, at the blind end of a sleepy cul-de-sac. Here, silence wasn't just absence of noise. It was a presence, thick and comforting, enveloping the brick bungalows and manicured lawns where families ambled and children's laughter occasionally punctuated the calm. Or so I believed. A profound miscalculation. Midnight had bled into the nascent hours, cocooned in linens, adrift on the fragile edge of slumber after a draining workday. The world outside held its breath. Stillness, absolute. Then, shattering the calm, fracturing the peace I'd so carefully curated, the chime of the doorbell. Electric shock. My heart leapt against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Who, in this hushed corner of the world, would call at such an hour? My phone's cold glow confirmed the absurdity. 12:17 a.m. A prank, surely. A misplaced delivery driver lost in the suburban maze. Wishful thinking vaporized as the bell pealed again, a sustained, demanding summons that scraped against the quiet. A tremor started deep within, a primitive unease prickling the nape of my neck. My bedroom, a haven at the house's rear, offered no view of the porch. Only the hallway, a shadowed artery, led to answers, or perhaps to something else entirely. The chime echoed once more, sharper now, insistent. Just a neighbor needing help, I reasoned weakly, forcing reluctant feet forward, phone clutched like a talisman. Near the entrance, an unnerving stillness permeated the air. It felt wrong. No shuffle of feet on the worn welcome mat, no silhouette cast beneath the door's narrow gap by the porch light. Just waiting. My hand trembled, hovering near the deadbolt's cool metal. Hello! A thin thread of sound, barely my own, frayed in the charged atmosphere. Is anyone there? The silence that answered was immense, a heavy, suffocating blanket. Ear pressed to the cool wood, nothing but the frantic thrum of my own pulse against the grain. No rustle, no breath, no indication of life beyond the threshold. Bracing myself, I risked the peephole's distorted eye. Empty. Lamplight painted the concrete driveway and dew-kissed lawn in pale, vacant strokes. Nobody. A chill, sharp as glacial ice, traced my spine. And then, jarringly close, the bell again. I recoiled, heart slamming, a gasp catching in my throat. Another frantic look through the lens. Still nothing. Utterly, impossibly empty. How? My phone vibrated, a stark buzz against my palm. A notification. Motion detected at the front door. Fingers fumbling, clumsy with adrenaline, I launched the security app. The live feed displayed the same deserted porch, bathed in the weak yellow street lamp glow. I scrolled back through the recording's timeline. Nothing. Nothing. Then, precisely correlating with the bell's electronic chime, a flicker, a warp in the pixels, a swift, indistinct smear across the frame, too ephemeral for the sensor to truly resolve, but undeniably there. A presence sensed, not seen, like static clinging to the very edge of perception. The chime returned, relentless now, a finger seemingly fused to the button, the sound drilling into the quiet house. Backing away from the door, caught between the desperate urge to tear it open and confront the void, and a primal instinct screaming to hide, to disappear. Logic fractured. Trembling, I dialed 911. The words tumbled out, a nonsensical report of a phantom bell ringer, feeling utterly foolish, even as icy dread confirmed the reality of my terror. The dispatcher's professional calm barely masked the skepticism, yet she promised a patrol car. Waiting was agony, pacing the narrow hall, eyes fixed on the impassive wood of the door. Finally, the reassuring sweep of headlights sliced the darkness. A cruiser idled at the curb, its presence a temporary anchor in the swirling fear. Relief warred with lingering dread as I opened the door to the officer's calm inquiry. "Evening, Mom. Call about a doorbell." My explanation felt thin under his steady gaze, the security footage anomaly difficult to articulate without sounding unhinged. Checked the camera. Saw something, maybe? He suggested pranksters, his tone patient. Sometimes kids in the neighborhood. I admitted I hadn't dared venture outside alone. "Right. Stay put," he instructed, his flashlight beam cutting a decisive swath around the house's perimeter, probing the shadows. The night pressed in, silent and heavy, watchful. Minutes later, he returned, boots quiet on the path. "Nothing," he reported, shaking his head, his breath misting slightly in the cool air. "No tracks, no disturbance. You certain you weren't dreaming, maybe?" Doubt, insidious and unwelcome, crept in. Was I overtired? Had stress conjured this phantom menace? Standing there in my pajamas, the sheer absurdity washed over me. Maybe, I conceded, cheeks burning with embarrassment. He offered a placating nod. "Stress does strange things. Call us again if anything else happens." He departed, taillights shrinking into the void, leaving me adrift once more in the oppressive quiet. Inside again, the deadbolt slid home with a hollow, definitive click. I leaned against the door, forcing shallow breaths, willing the mundane reality the officer represented to take hold. It was over. It had to be. Then, the chime. Piercing, immediate, impossibly loud. I froze, every nerve alight, disbelief warring with raw terror. He'd just left. They'd found nothing. Yet the bell persisted, a solid, unbroken drone, vibrating through the very wood beneath my hand, resonating in my bones. Through the peephole. Emptiness, absolute. Still, the ringing drilled into the silence, relentless, inescapable, filling every corner of the house. A strangled gasp escaped me as I stumbled backward, away from the vibrating door. Panic seized me, cold and suffocating. The sound swelled, consuming the small house, echoing not just in the hall, but inside my skull. A physical pressure. I clamped hands over my ears, a futile gesture against the sonic assault. Louder, louder. And then, silence. Abrupt, profound, leaving a ringing vacancy in its wake. My body remained rigid, coiled, anticipating the next assault. Nothing. A shuddering breath escaped my lips, tasting like dust and fear. Turning, finally, towards the illusory sanctuary of my room, my gaze snagged on something alien. There, on the polished floor just inside the threshold, where nothing had been mere moments before, lay a small, folded square of paper. It hadn't been there when I spoke to the officer. It hadn't been there when I closed and locked the door. With a hand that felt disconnected from my body, numb and distant, I retrieved it. The paper felt unnaturally cold, brittle, almost icy to the touch. I unfolded the single crease. 4 words, scrawled in a frantic, jagged script that seemed to vibrate on the page, leaped out. I'm already inside. The walls seemed to contract, shadows deepening, morphing into watchful, predatory shapes. The familiar contours of my home twisted into something menacing and unknown. Clutching the icy paper, its message burning into my palm, I retreated, eyes scanning every corner, every doorway, every sliver of darkness. Time lost meaning. How long did I stand paralyzed, listening only to the frantic pulse hammering in my ears, straining for the slightest creak, the faintest breath that wasn't my own? The house remained tomb silent, yet felt profoundly, terrifyingly occupied. Eventually, abandoning any thought of the bedroom upstairs, I navigated on trembling legs to the living room sofa. There I huddled, bathing the house in defiant electric light, phone a useless weight in my lap, eyes darting until the merciful gray of dawn finally began to dilute the suffocating terror. Sleep was impossible. With the first true light painting the windows, I threw essentials into a bag and fled my sanctuary, now irrevocably defiled. I never looked back. Whisper Creek holds its deep silence still, but it is no longer mine. It belongs to whatever waits behind the door. A premonition, a shiver not born of cold, traced my spine the instant my boots met the asphalt of that forgotten lane. Street lamps, sparse and dying, cast twitching pools of light onto the cracked pavement. Exhaustion clung to me, a leaden shroud after the day's toil. Home was a siren call I yearned to answer. Then, the house materialized on the corner. 2 stories of brooding silhouette, windows gaping like vacant eyes. From within, a thread of melody unwound, thin and brittle. The ghost of some bygone waltz played on a phonograph thick with dust. No lights burned within its depths, yet an undeniable current tugged me closer. Perhaps, I reasoned against my better judgment, someone inside knew a quicker path through this urban maze. The mistake announced itself the moment my weight settled on the porch's yielding planks. Stairs ascended into shadow, marred by fissures that spiderwebbed across the wood. Testing the first step, my right foot plunged through rotten timber, a geyser of ancient dust erupting around my shin. I choked, grabbing for the handrail. It wobbled precariously in my grasp. A frantic drumbeat commenced in my temples. That spectral tune persisted, now slower, distorted, notes slurring as if the turntable itself were drowning. Through the vacant windows, only impenetrable darkness stared back. The door, slightly ajar, shed flakes of desiccated paint like diseased skin. A push. Hinges shrieked a protest, a high, dry, metallic cry, untouched by oil for decades. A violent exhalation of air, cold and carrying the scent of tombs, surged past me as I crossed the threshold. The door cannoned shut behind me with concussive force. My heart seized. I spun, wrestling the handle, immobile, utterly sealed. I stood frozen in the gloom-drenched vestibule. Floorboards groaned beneath my boots, then sagged ominously. A reflexive leap saved me as wood splintered, my leg plunging nearly knee-deep into the void before I wrenched it free, gasping. The air hung thick, a suffocating blend of stagnant breath and the sweetish decay of wood returning to earth. Inside, the disembodied waltz swelled, emanating not from a single point, but seeming to bleed from the very walls, an omnipresent, mournful resonance. Slow breaths, measured. I forced calm into lungs tight with panic. Each step became a cautious negotiation, testing the integrity of the floor near the relative solidity of the walls. A tremor started in my hands. A bead of sweat traced a cold path down my temple, my shirt clinging damply to my spine. Escape became the imperative, a rear exit, a window to force. But the nearby windows, those gaping voids from the street, were sealed from within by rough-hewn planks. Deeper, I ventured, drawn by slivers of spectral moonlight filtering through cracks in the plaster. My own tread seemed unnaturally loud, amplified, as if the house itself possessed vast hidden chambers. And then, the whispers, sibilant murmurs just at the edge of hearing, always behind me. Each swift turn revealed only the corridor receding into blackness. The chilling thought solidified. I might be entombed here until dawn. The melody intensified as I pressed onward, a grating, cyclical lament scraped out by phantom violins, underscored by a low, vibrating hum reminiscent of a derelict church organ. It looped relentlessly, the same few bars cycling into madness, my nerves frayed, exposed, my fists clenched and unclenched involuntarily, a primal readiness. Ahead, a staircase clawed its way upward. Gaps scarred the banister, the treads listed at perilous angles. I paused at its foot, listening. Voices, not conversation, but a rhythmic, liturgical chanting, the words unintelligible, alien syllables woven together in a layered drone, like a congregation of the dead murmuring secrets. A prickling sensation crawled across my scalp. My breath hitched, quickening. Something compelled me upward. The source, I felt, lay above. My foot met the first step. A prolonged groan answered. Ascending was a trial, gripping the coarse, splintered wood of the surviving banister sections, each tread protesting, some shrieking, sending tremors through my unsteady legs. My mouth was parchment. The taste of dust coated my tongue. The landing opened onto a long corridor, flanked by closed doors. At its terminus, a solitary window admitted a wash of anemic moonlight. The chanting was clearer here, emanating from further down, perhaps behind one of the doors. The music persisted, that maddening loop now laced with a discordant buzz. My pulse hammered against my eardrums. I reached the first door on the right. The knob was ice beneath my palm. Turning it slowly, I nudged the door inward. Squealing hinges briefly amplified the music, before it receded. Empty, save for skeletal furniture draped in cobwebs. My flashlight beam, wrested from my pack, sliced through the dust-laden air, illuminating derelict chairs, a three-legged table, a distinct creak from the hallway floorboards behind me. I whirled, light stabbing the emptiness. Only shadows danced. My heart hammered my ribs. Back in the corridor. The next door resisted, locked fast. The third yielded to a cramped space, thick with the odor of damp plaster. A window, cracked a finger's width. Hope surged. I heaved against it, desperate for egress, but it was fused shut. The chanting pulse nearer then, intimate, raising the hairs on my neck. Defeated, I retreated. As I neared the corridor's end, a disorienting illusion took hold. The final door seemed to recede with each step, the distance stretching impossibly. My flashlight beam sputtered, faltered, a frantic tap. My stomach plummeted as the floor beneath me vibrated, a low shudder running through the house's very bones. The planks groaned louder, cracking ominously with every advance. My knees turned to water, the fear of another plunge paralyzing. At last, the final door on the left. I pressed my ear against the wood. The music felt more distant here, paradoxically, but the voices were sharp, distinct, a litany of nonsensical phonemes recited with unnerving clarity. Heat bloomed on my face, sweat beaded on my brow. I pushed the door open. A vast vacant chamber unfolded before me. Wide floor planks lay bare beneath layers of dust and fallen plaster. Opposite, tall windows stood open to the night, bathing the space in stark lunar luminescence. I stepped inside, flashlight beam sweeping the emptiness. My footfalls resonated unnaturally. Then, the impossible happened. I stopped walking, but the echoes did not. They continued, a phantom cadence, the sound of multiple footfalls overlapping mine, following me into the silence. A staggered, ghostly rhythm. My chest constricted. I spun, light slashing the air. The room remained utterly bare, yet the spectral echoes persisted for a moment longer before finally dissolving. Abruptly, the chanting swelled, ricocheting off the bare walls before collapsing into sudden, profound silence. I stood rigid, breath sawing in my throat. My questing light snagged on something anomalous. A door, mostly obscured by a ragged curtain nailed crudely to the wall. Just then, the music resumed, but different now, seeming to emanate from below, vibrations tingling through the soles of my boots. I navigated the debris-strewn floor, splintered wood, curls of desiccated wallpaper, toward the hidden opening. The door yielded to my shoulder's pressure, revealing another corridor, this one narrower, the air palpably damp, carrying the cloying fungal scent of deep decay. The chanting ebbed and flowed, a disorienting pulse, near then far. My legs were taut wires. Breathing became a conscious effort. I advanced, light playing over cracked plaster that exposed the lath skeleton beneath. A door to the right. The knob resisted, then gave way with a sharp crack as I forced it. A cramped storeroom, lined with mostly bare shelves. A few glass jars held desiccated remnants, herbs, leaves. The intensified miasma within triggered a gag reflex. I slammed it shut and continued. The passage terminated in a descending stairwell. These steps appeared sturdier, stone perhaps, vanishing into darkness below. The music undeniably originated from down there. The chanting, too, was louder, closer. Retreat whispered temptation, but the memory of the sealed front door spurred me on. Perhaps salvation lay below. With each downward step, the temperature plummeted. My skin tightened. A shiver traced my spine, unrelated to the chill. My own breath echoed starkly in the enclosed space. I clung to the slick, damp railing, flashlight beam probing the abyss. The stairs deposited me onto a level I hadn't suspected from outside. A subterranean floor, paved in rough stone. My boots scuffed loudly, the sound skittering along bare concrete walls, weeping patches of viridian moss. Somewhere nearby, water dripped with metronomic regularity. The chanting surged, seeming to wait just beyond the next turn. A knot formed in my gut. Tension radiated into my shoulders. Every instinct screamed against rounding that corner. Yet the thought of remaining here, adrift in the stale corridor, listening to those disembodied voices, was more terrifying still. I forced myself forward. The corner revealed a long, rectangular chamber, perhaps once a cellar workshop. Rough wooden tables lined the periphery, their surfaces marred by dark, unidentifiable stains. Shelves at the far end stood vacant, but for scraps of brittle paper. And there, positioned centrally, sat an antique gramophone, its large brass horn gleaming dully. A scratched vinyl disc turned on its platter, generating that same warped, looping melody. The horn aimed toward a corner, causing the sound to rebound strangely. My light caught the glint of metal. The chanting seemed to saturate the air, yet its source remained elusive, incorporeal. The record spun, trapped in its groove. My chest felt banded. I swallowed against a dry throat. Drawn to it, I approached, kneeling beside the machine. The record was deeply scored, filmed with grime. I reached out, my fingers brushing the tone arm. Instantly, the chanting detonated, a sonic explosion, screaming directly into my mind. I scrambled backward, flashlight tumbling from my grasp, but miraculously staying lit. My ears shrieked with phantom noise. In my peripheral vision, shadows writhed along the walls, elongating and contracting. I snatched up the light, sweeping its beam wildly. Nothing, just stone and shadow. The auditory assault continued, relentless, making thought impossible. I clamped my hands over my ears, squeezed my eyes shut, heart battering my ribs. Breathe. Just breathe. Slowly, agonizingly, the volume receded, settling back into a low, indistinct murmur. Eyes open, the gramophone, the record still turning, needle tracking the same worn path. Steeling myself, I reached forward again, carefully lifted the arm, and settled it onto its rest. The music died. Silence crashed down, broken only by the persistent, soft plink, plink of dripping water. I stood frozen, breath held captive in my lungs, waiting for the other shoe to drop. My flashlight flickered, threatened, then steadied. The imperative was escape. Run. Turning from the silent gramophone, my eyes scanned frantically, landed on a single door set into the opposite wall. I scrambled towards it, light dancing ahead, revealing hazards. A rusted chain coiled on the floor, a depression where the stone seemed to have collapsed inward. Skirting the debris, I seized the handle. The door opened onto a narrow, rough-hewn passage. A current of blessedly cold, fresh air flowed from its depths. I plunged through, pulling the door shut behind me. The chanting felt muffled now, distant, trapped on the other side. The passage angled upward slightly. Ahead, a pale luminescence beckoned. Moonlight. An exit. Relief, sharp and physical, loosened the vice around my chest. Adrenaline surged, propelling my legs into a stumbling run. The tunnel terminated in a fractured doorway, its frame splintered, forcing me to stoop low. I burst out into the open air behind the house, a tangled wilderness of weeds choking a yard bordered by a skeletal, collapsing fence. The night air, cool and clean, rushed into my lungs. Above, a scattering of stars pierced the clear dark canvas around a gibbous moon. My limbs trembled with reaction, weak but functional. Free. I stumbled away from the structure's oppressive presence, tripping through waist-high grass and over unseen obstacles. Reaching the fence, I found a breach and squeezed through, back onto the forsaken street, but further down now, near where it met another road. The house hulked behind me, a blacker void against the night sky. Its windows, I noted with a fresh wave of unease, were now tightly shut, dark squares where open maws had gaped before. I stood on the cracked sidewalk, gulping air, my heart a frantic bird against my ribs. My shirt clung, saturated with cold sweat. Images flickered behind my eyes, the spinning record, the collapsing floor, the receding door. My throat was sandpaper, water, distance. That was all I craved. The house remained inert, silent. No music leaked out now, no spectral chanting. I retreated backward, unable to tear my gaze from its blind windows. Nothing stirred. No flicker of light betrayed any presence within. Then I turned, forcing myself into a rapid walk, then almost a jog, refusing the urge to look over my shoulder. My legs felt like sodden wool. Scuff marks scarred the pavement beneath my clumsy feet. Blocks melted away until the sickly yellow glow of a distant gas station promised sanctuary. I didn't pause until I was inside its sterile brightness. The clerk's indifferent glance registered my disheveled state. Panting, sweat-sheened, coated in grime. Wordlessly, I purchased water, retreating back into the night to lean against the cool brick wall, down in half the bottle in desperate gulps. My fingers, I noticed, still trembled. Tiny splinters, souvenirs from that treacherous banister, pricked my palm. Dust and filth stained my clothes. Slow breaths, focus on the mundane, the drone of cars at the pumps, the distant hum of the highway. Reality, no insidious music, no chilling chorus, just the night air and the knowledge, the certainty that I was out. It was real. The whispers, the phantom steps, the floor yielding like rotten fruit, the malevolent spin of that record, inexplicable, yet undeniably experienced. Who chanted? How did space warp within those walls? Why did the house seal itself, try to hold me? I couldn't fathom the answers. All I knew was the oppressive sentience I'd felt, the sense of a presence actively attempting to ensnare me. Sleep, behind locked doors, seemed an impossible luxury. I haven't returned. The neighborhood remains on my periphery, a place skirted around. That particular street is forbidden territory now. Sometimes, driving past the general area, my eyes search the darkness for that silhouette, but I never find it. Perhaps it hides well in the shadows, or perhaps my gaze instinctively shies away. A residual disquiet always settles over me near there, a prickling certainty of being observed. The memory remains indelible, the echo of unseen followers, the terrifying crescendo of voices in the cellar. I rarely speak of it. The tale strains credulity, but the truth of it is etched into me. Avoidance is my only strategy. If that house still squats on its corner, brooding in the darkness, it does so without me, and that fragile knowledge is the only solace I possess. Shortcuts through desolate places are excised from my life. No matter the weariness, the long way home is infinitely preferable to risking another encounter with such hungry architecture. A whisper, thin, snap, the sound of a camera shutter breathing in the dark, arrested my motion, my fingers hovering millimeters from the light switch. 3 a.m., the dead hour. Silence, thick and absolute, should have filled my apartment. I was, ostensibly, alone. As inertia yielded, and my head pivoted toward the source of that minute disturbance, a glacial current traced my spine. There, swallowed by the Stygian gloom of my living area, pulsed a single, insistent ruby eye, the telltale light of a recording device. Someone occupied this space with me, unseen, and a sickening certainty bloomed. This vigil was not new. My name is Anya. I never conceived that securing my sanctuary, this coveted loft, would plunge me into a waking state of siege. It began 3 months prior, the culmination of scrimped savings finally manifesting as a down payment on a breathtaking space carved from the bones of a resurrected factory. Exposed brick ascended towards vaulted ceilings, whispering tales of industry reborn. Its allure was immediate, visceral. The agent, effusive, extolled the virtues of its integrated intelligence. Lights that anticipated dusk, climate that learned my preferences, security woven into the very walls, immaculate, seductive. Those initial weeks unfolded in a haze of contentment. I luxuriated in the sheer volume of the place, the way light cascaded through colossal windows, the profound sense of arrival. Mine. But then, dissonant notes began to creep into the symphony. Minor irregularities easily dismissed, returning home to find lamps aglow that I'd sworn extinguished, the thermostat humming at temperatures alien to my touch, waking once, deep in the night's embrace, to the television murmuring dialogue from a show I'd never selected. Forgetfulness, I reasoned, the eccentricities of settling in. Yet, the tendrils of unease tightened their grip. A persistent sensation took root, the feeling of being perceived, even in solitude. Fleeting motions teased the periphery of my vision, dissolving into nothingness the moment I turned. Then arrived the night punctuated by that almost inaudible shutter click. Rooted to the spot, I stared, transfixed by the malevolent pulse of red across the room. My thoughts fractured, scattering. How long had it resided there, this silent witness? What other intrusions lay concealed within my haven? With hands that trembled like autumn leaves, I finally threw the switch, flooding the room with harsh light, and commenced the hunt. The subsequent hour yielded 3 more clandestine observers, one nestled in the intimacy of my bedroom, another tucked away in the bathroom's sterile privacy, a third secreted amidst the kitchen appliances, diminutive, expertly camouflaged. Had I not been actively seeking them, their presence would have remained an insidious secret. Violation washed over me, cold and absolute, exposed. Who held the other end of this gaze, and for what purpose? Instinct screamed for the authorities, but as my fingers closed around my phone, a chilling counterthought paralyzed me. What if this network extended beyond a lone voyeur? What if the system itself was compromised? Strategy was paramount. This apartment, riddled with unseen eyes, was no longer safe. Yet, tipping my hand, revealing my discovery to whoever orchestrated this, felt equally perilous. I seized a bag, forcing a semblance of normalcy onto my movements as I packed essentials, clothes, toiletries, my laptop, provisions for an indefinite absence. I dialed a friend, carefully modulating my voice to casual indifference, requesting refuge. "Just need a change of scenery," I offered, praying the tremor beneath the words went undetected. Stepping into the hallway, the awareness of my neighbors sharpened. Had their scrutiny always been this intense? The elderly couple opposite, the young professional, Silas, adjacent. Their gazes seemed to latch onto me, following my retreat towards the elevator's descending sanctuary. The following days passed in a fugue state at my friend's apartment, each shadow a potential watcher, every unexpected sound a jolt to my frayed nerves. I plunged into the digital abyss, researching hidden cameras, stalking methodologies, the bleeding edge of surveillance tech. The deeper I delved, the more profound my terror became. This wasn't isolated. Across the metropolis, whispers echoed my own experiences, inexplicable noises, the pervasive sense of observation, electronics behaving with spectral autonomy. Officially dismissed, paranoia, technical gremlins. But I knew. There was a pattern, a presence. I had to unearth more. Under the pretext of retrieving forgotten garments, I ventured back. This time, I was armed. A colleague, a wizard with circuitry, had lent me a signal detector, placated by a fabricated tale of a suspicious X and potential automotive bugs. The instant I crossed the threshold, the device shrieked into life. Not merely cameras, the air hummed with unseen listeners. The signals weren't confined to my unit. They radiated from the building's very core. My heart hammered against my ribs as I tracked the electronic spore. It led downward into the building's subterranean depths, culminating at a locked door I'd never registered before. A simple plaque declared, "Maintenance, authorized personnel only." The detector, however, screamed a different truth. Behind that barrier lay the nexus. Prudence urged retreat, a call to the outside world, any rational action, but the gnawing imperative to know, to comprehend the architecture of this violation, eclipsed caution. Employing skills gleaned from frantic, late-night video tutorials, I manipulated the lock. It yielded with a soft click. The reality within stole the air from my lungs. Banks of monitors glowed, a constellation of stolen moments. Feeds from countless apartments flickered across the screens. My neighbors, oblivious, moving through the intimate choreography of their private lives. And there, stark and accusing, my own empty loft. The scope widened, feeds spilled out beyond the building, capturing fragments of the city, bustling offices, quiet cafes, sun-drenched parks. Wherever humanity gathered, unseen eyes were diligently recording. As I stood, grappling with the enormity of the display, a sound spun me around. Silas, my neighbor, occupied the doorway. No surprise registered on his features, only an unnerving sense of expectation. We wondered when you'd piece it together, Anya, he stated, his voice a low, placid current. You possess a keener perception than most. It's why you were selected. Selected? The word stumbled out. For what? A smile touched his lips, but failed to ignite his eyes. To join us, naturally. We observe. We evaluate. You've navigated the assessment. As he spoke, figures materialized behind him, coalescing in the doorway's frame. Faces swam into focus. My other neighbors, the overly enthusiastic real estate agent, the barista who knew my coffee order by heart. They formed a silent perimeter, their collective gaze unnervingly intent. What is this? I demanded, striving to barricade the fear trembling in my voice. Some kind of cult? Silas emitted a soft chuckle. Oh, Anya, it transcends such mundane classifications. We are the Watchers. We perceive all, comprehend all, and now you belong. My reality warped. This scenario felt ripped from a fever dream, too grotesque, too terrifyingly absurd. Yet, the silent testimony of the screens, the hundreds of lives laid bare, confirmed its chilling veracity. And if I decline, I ventured, the unspoken consequence hanging heavy in the air. His smile iced over. That is not a viable path, Anya. Your knowledge is now a liability. You are either integral to the operation, or, let us simply say, contingencies exist for potential disruptions. Trapped, cornered, yet amidst the terror, a treacherous sliver of fascination sparked within me. The sheer scale of their power, the omniscience, it possessed a dark magnetism. What would be required of me? The question escaped my lips, alien and shocking, even to myself. A subtle relaxation seemed to ripple through the assembled group. For the present, resume your existence. Maintain appearances. Your first directive will arrive shortly. Emerging from the basement's oppressive atmosphere, my thoughts churned, my life irrevocably fractured. I had stumbled into a conspiracy dwarfing imagination, and now I was tethered to its core. The ensuing weeks blurred into a performance. I enacted the rituals of my daily routine, hyper-conscious of the lenses charting my every breath. But a shift had occurred. Now, I watched too. Details previously invisible sprang into sharp relief. The calculated placement of cameras in public squares, the unnervingly focused way certain individuals observed the flow of crowds. My initiation arrived sealed within a plain envelope, slipped beneath my door like an ordinary piece of mail. Inside, a name, an address, explicit instructions to install another silent eye in a designated location. My hands shook as I absorbed the text, the stark reality of my entanglement crashing down. I stood upon a precipice. Comply, dissolve into their ranks, forever watching, never truly inhabiting my own life. Or resist, expose this hidden web, and risk utter annihilation. As I commit these words to paper, the choice remains unmade, but clarity has dawned on one immutable truth. Nothing is merely as it appears. The world is saturated with eyes, perpetually observing, eternally recording. Once that veil is pierced, the sanctuary of ignorance is lost forever. So, the next time that primal instinct whispers you're being watched, heed it. In this brave new theater of perpetual surveillance, perhaps paranoia is simply the price of perception. The memory remains indelible, etched not in thought, but in sinew and nerve. That first dawn, I witnessed visages bloom within the fire. I was immersed in the profound solitude of a remote valley, seeking refuge in a weekend of primitive camping. This sanctuary, visited before, had always offered a balm of quietude, an expanse untroubled. But that night, the familiar peace fractured, replaced by an invisible tether, a grip that tightened and refused release. Arrival came under the waning afternoon sun. My pack, a leaden weight, dug into aching shoulders after the long trek. Stillness saturated the air, broken only by the distant cries of unseen birds and the dry sigh of wind through brittle scrub. Near a meandering stream, I chose my ground, a relatively level patch marked by a circle of stones, the ghost of campfires past. Gear deposited, I wrestled the tent into existence, a 30-minute ritual of poles and stakes, double-checking each anchor against the caprice of the night. As twilight bled across the sky, the hunt for firewood began. Fallen limbs lay damp beneath the open sky, compelling me towards drier offerings, sheltered beneath the skirts of larger trees. My hands grew grimy, scratched by coarse bark. Leg muscles protested the constant stooping, yet I amassed a respectable pyre within the stone ring. From my pocket, a lighter emerged. Dried leaves resisted, then reluctantly surrendered to a tentative flame. Gentle breaths coaxed it wider, until it licked eagerly at the twigs. The nascent fire crackled its approval. Settling onto a folded blanket, I stretched weary limbs, mesmerized by the flame's erratic dance, their incandescent tongues flicking sparks into the deepening gloom. An initial tranquility settled over me. Eyelids, heavy with the day's exertion, fought to remain open, reluctant to relinquish this fragile peace. Then, observing the fire's heart, a peculiarity surfaced. Shapes coalesced within the shifting inferno, not the usual abstract forms, but faces. Mute mouths opened, closed, miming unheard words. Whispers, I felt, more than heard. Fatigue, I reasoned initially. Blinking, rubbing my eyes, only sharpened their definition. I leaned closer. A frantic drummer took up station behind my ribs. A metallic tang bloomed on my tongue. The faces seemed distorted, their movements languid, unnervingly deliberate, straining towards articulation. A soft, sibilant hissing threaded the air. The fine hairs on my nape prickled upright. Scrambling to my feet, I backed away, seeking to sever the unsettling connection. A whisper, faint yet distinct, brushed my ear like a phantom breath. I spun, finding only empty air. Breath hitched, ragged, shoulders nodded defensively. Compelled, I turned back to the fire. Wood cracked, a sharp retort shattering the quiet. Flames surged, and the faces reformed, clearer now. Murmuring arose, not loud, but rhythmic, evocative of some hushed, persistent chant. I sank down again, palms pressed hard against my thighs, straining to decipher the susurrus. Leaning in, heat pressing against my face, the murmurs gained texture. Fragments emerged, trail, then ravine, and unmistakably, follow. A chaotic jumble, yet undeniably present. my chest constricted, my heart hammered, a frantic prisoner against my ribs. A swift scan revealed only encroaching darkness, the silhouettes of bushes, utterly alone. The voices emanated from the flames. Rising once more, I retreated further. Instantly, the flames leaped higher, tendrils of light seeming to grasp for me. A wave of heat washed over my face, stinging my eyes. More words surfaced, murmuring of an old path, a sudden drop into a deep fissure in the earth. I knew of a ravine nearby, a place unexplored on my previous visits. A cold knot of panic tightened in my gut. My legs trembled. Breath grew shallow, inadequate. Turning away from the fire became an imperative. Yet, barely a few steps taken, the flames erupted in brilliance, transforming the modest campfire into a miniature furnace. Light poured forth, concentrated into a searing corridor of heat and glare. Arms flew up instinctively to shield my face. Eyes watered fiercely. The very air seemed to sizzle. The whispering intensified, coalescing into multiple voices, a chorus urging me onward toward the unseen ravine. I remember fists clenching, standing rooted, torn between primal fear and a bizarre, insidious compulsion to obey. Skin prickled with heat, sweat beaded on my forehead. My pulse thundered in my ears. I pivoted towards the tent, desperate to escape the luminous tunnel. The instant my weight shifted, the flame subsided somewhat, a calculated retreat, a lure. I refused the bait. Darting into the tent, I fumbled with the zipper, hands shaking uncontrollably. Sealed inside, enveloped in darkness, the frantic rhythm of my own breathing filled the small space. Outside, the fire crackled faintly. The whispering, though muffled, persisted, an undeniable presence just beyond the thin fabric wall. I sat cross-legged, staring into blackness, forcing slow, deliberate breaths against the tightness in my chest, the ache in my lungs. Gradually, the fire consumed itself. The glow against the tent walls dimmed, faded. Exhaustion, potent and undeniable, finally dragged me down onto my sleeping bag. My mind buzzed, a hive of confusion and fear, but oblivion beckoned. I surrendered, praying for the mundane clarity of morning. Sunrise found me stiff-necked, my back protesting the uneven ground. Unzipping the tent released the scent of damp ash into the cool air. The fire pit held only charcoal remnants and half-consumed sticks within its stone embrace, deceptively ordinary. The valley's profound hush seemed restored. Fatigue-induced hallucination, I tried to persuade myself. Yet, approaching the pit, an involuntary chill traced my spine. The charcoal fragments seemed unnaturally scorched, twisted into grotesque parodies of contorted faces. Rubbing my arms, I fought to dispel the memory's residue. Packing became a frantic, hurried affair. I couldn't tolerate another moment in that spot. Clammy hands fumbled with straps, while my eyes darted nervously, scanning the perimeter for unseen watchers. Backpack hoisted, I turned back down the trail, each footfall echoing the pounding in my head. No other hikers crossed my path. The valley kept its secrets. Home offered a semblance of normalcy. Gear stowed away. A long, hot shower eased sore muscles, grounding me in familiar surroundings. For days, I deliberately walled off the memory, immersing myself in routine. Work, mindless television, the pretense of equilibrium. Then, a power outage plunged the house into darkness. I lit a candle. As the small flame wavered, casting dancing shadows, a low murmur reached my ears. I froze. mouth instantly dry, gaze locked on the tiny point of light. The whisper, though faint, was unmistakable, the same insidious tone from the valley. With a choked gasp, I snuffed the flame, heart hammering, embracing the sudden blackness. Risk was intolerable. My mind raced. Was I fracturing? Yet the sound had been utterly real. From that moment, the curse was sealed. Lighting a match, a candle, even flicking a lighter unleashed the voices. Every ignition brought the soft, chanting susurrus, the persistent urging towards unknown destinations, different trails, mentions of a gorge, a hollow deep within the earth. Scattered words, always imbued with a chilling urgency. An aversion to fire became instinct. Cooking shifted to the electric stovetop. Cold meals became common. Flashlights replaced matches. Lighters were banished. But vigilance sometimes slipped. An afternoon barbecue at a friend's house. He needed help with the grill. I tried to demur, but he insisted. The moment the propane caught, the low whispers filled my ears. I recoiled, dropping the lighter. My friend's concerned query met a mumbled excuse about a burnt finger. Heart pounding, I retreated from the grill, the soft chanting a persistent hum beneath the surface of hearing. Feigning the need for something from my car, I fled the yard, arms tingling, forehead damp despite the mild air. A sudden headache, I claimed, and drove home, shaken. Weeks dissolved into a state of heightened nervousness. Open flames became objects of dread. A smoker using a lighter prompted an abrupt turn. The candle aisle in the grocery store was strictly avoided. Nightmares became frequent visitors, replays of the campfire faces, their whispered commands pulling me inexorably towards that ravine. I'd wake drenched in sweat, heart battering my ribs, body rigid, breath shallow. A morbid curiosity gnawed. Could the valley itself hold an explanation? Returning felt both necessary and terrifying. The thought of deliberately lighting another fire, inviting those voices, invoking their command to walk into some hidden abyss, was paralyzing. The memory of that incandescent tunnel, the way the flames surged when I tried to flee, the unnerving sensation of being watched, perhaps guided, it held me captive. Driven by a need for answers, however faint, I haunted the local library, poring over old trail guides and regional maps, standard paths, familiar geography. Nothing hinted at anomalous ravines or clandestine sites. Tentative inquiries with local hikers yielded only shrugs. The valley was quiet, they said, sometimes blustery, but unremarkable. Returning home from these excursions, I'd find myself sweating, face flushed, hands trembling. Merely researching the area seemed to conjure the whispers in my mind's ear. Tension became a constant companion, settling in my shoulders, blurring my focus. I took to checking locks obsessively at night, plagued by an irrational fear that something might compel me to strike a match. The next encounter came unexpectedly. A neighbor, tending a small backyard bonfire of pruned branches, asked for a hand. Stepping closer to the heat, my stomach churned, throat constricted. A ringing filled my ears. The fire crackled, and instantly the faint whispers returned, murmuring of a path near a cascade, concealed behind boulders. My knees weakened. Backing away, I stammered an apology, unable to help. His confused look followed me as I retreated indoors, shutting the door against the sound, breathing fast, heart racing. Sleep offered little respite. Each night, a persistent magnetic pull drew my thoughts back to the valley. Sheets clung damply as I tossed and turned. Fantasies of simply driving out, observing the campsite from a safe distance, warred with the visceral memory of the fire's beckoning power, the terrifying possibility of losing control upon confronting that presence again. One evening, the breaking point arrived. A storm knocked out the power. My trusty flashlight, equipped with fresh batteries, cast only a feeble beam. A search revealed no spare batteries. A candle was the only alternative. I stood staring at it, a silent war raging within, teeth clenched, neck rigid. Finally, yielding, I struck a match. The instant the wick caught, the murmur began. Jaw tightening, a flush of heat radiated through my chest. My scalp prickled. I listened, transfixed, as the whispers reiterated their instructions. Follow the trail. Find the place where the earth falls away. I blew out the flame, but the voice echoed in the ensuing darkness. Sweat slicked my temples. Impulsively, I grabbed my car keys and fled the house, craving air, motion, escape. Rain lashed the windshield as I navigated the slick roads, gripping the wheel, knuckles white. Breath came in ragged gasps. My gaze kept flicking to the empty passenger seat, half expecting a manifestation. The wipers scraped a frantic rhythm. I drove without direction for nearly an hour before circling back home, still profoundly unsettled. And so it remains. Ignition is impossible. Witnessing others tend fires knots my insides. Every flicker, every flame seems to breathe those same instructions. The voice is constant, unchanging in its obsession with hidden paths, deep terrestrial scars, and rituals beyond my comprehension. Nights are restless landscapes. Days are tightropes of tension. I have not returned to the valley. I doubt I ever will. Something there wants me, exerts a subtle gravity, but facing it feels like surrender. Explaining this to a doctor, a therapist, feels futile. The inevitable diagnosis, stress, hallucination. But this transcends hallucination. It is knowledge, heard and felt. Closing my eyes, imagining a spark, conjures the sound, the visceral memory. My body remembers, reacting as if I were still crouched by that fire, watching those terrible faces emerge, absorbing their commands. There is no cessation, no ignoring it anymore. I navigate life day by day, defined by avoidance, hoping fire remains unnecessary. Sometimes vigilance holds. Other times, necessity or accident forces an encounter. A match struck, a lighter flicked, and the voices rush back in. That night in the valley irrevocably altered my existence. Why the flames birthed those visages, why the whispers fixate on the ravine, remains opaque. I know only that they do, and I am bound to this haunting. It is a constant presence, hovering just beyond perception, awaiting the smallest spark to flare back into undeniable reality. Describing it feels inadequate. This isn't poetry or metaphor. It is a tangible voice within a tangible flame, directing me towards a place I dread. That is the stark truth. It is here. It is real. I hear it. I feel its pull, and I doubt I will ever strike another light without hearing those whispers again.